Welcome to another episode of Beyond Risk and Back. My name is Aaron Huey. Thank you very much for being here, everyone. Parents, teachers, clinicians, those of you who are here getting that support, that help, that follow-up, that information to continue to help and love on these kids in your life that are just struggling and consequences aren't working anymore. It's hit the wall. Thanks for being here. Thanks for getting support. Thanks for taking care of yourself in that way. That's a big deal. And if you're a frequent listener to this show, thank you for coming back. Everybody, please listen, like, subscribe, share. And by God, if you like the show, give us a review. That really helps us keep bumping up in the ranks. But more importantly, that helps parents who are looking for help find the help they need to parent. 275 plus episodes in, I love coming across kindred spirits. I've got Andy Goldstrom on the show. Andy, first of all, let's be clear out of the gate. Andy is a dad, and Andy went through it. Parents, the reason why you're here is the reason why Andy ended up doing what he does. I'm going to let him talk about that. But you've heard me say this often on episodes where I say the pain becomes the path, the wound becomes the way, the tears become the trail, the wreckage becomes the resume. And this mess that we're dealing with, parents, this mess that you're dealing with, well, that's what creates the messenger. And one of the reasons why I wanted Andy on the show is because I believe, without saying this to him, I believe he took that concept to heart. He took a situation he was going through and said, wow, that sucked. Let's make sure other parents have a guidepost, signs, something, breadcrumbs to get through what they're going through. So we brought a parent coach, Andy Goldstrom, on the show. Andy, welcome to Beyond Risk and Back. Appreciate you being here, man.
Thanks for having me, Aaron. It's great to be here.
So let's jump in, as always. Tell the story, man. I got pieces and bits of it. You're a parent. Everything's going perfect. And then what happened?
It's funny, you say it that way, that it was perfect, and then you kind of hit a cliff. It was a little bit that way. I have two daughters. One is 28 now, and the younger one is 23, and the one we're speaking about is the one who's 23. And when she was a younger kid, she's a cute kid. She's effervescent. She never met a stranger. She had a great sense of humor, was popular, did well at school. Everything was good. And then when she hit her teenage years, she started struggling a little bit. We didn't know what was going on. We got her a tutor and some counseling and some other things, and it wasn't really helping. So we got her tested, and it ended up that she was very low on the short-term memory scale. She rated in the 12th percentile. So basically, the way her brain formed, she wasn't retaining information in the same way that her peers were being able to retain information. So they started outgrowing her socially and academically, and it sent her spiraling. And again, we tried many things locally with therapists and with IEPs and with tutors and psychiatrists and all the rest. And it didn't help. When she got into her last year of high school, it got to a point where she was taking drugs, not wanting to get up and go to school, very defiant with us, sneaking out of the house, driving while intoxicated. As parents, we struggled. We didn't know what to do. So what do? We locked down on her. We actually tried to create a safe space for her, and that actually made it worse because we weren't understanding what she was going through. We thought she was just trying to be a bad kid and rebel, but she really wasn't. She was just trying to cope with everything that she was trying to do. It was a really hard time. Parents go through a lot of different things when it comes to the path that they think their kids were going on and how they should go to school, go to college, get a job, get married, do whatever. And it doesn't always occur in that sequence, much less that time frame, if at all. We ended up coming across wilderness therapy and residential treatment and found programs that worked for us and for her. It was difficult because we took her out of her senior year of high school, right in the middle of it. She was removed and went to those two programs, finished up high school away, never got to go to her high school graduation or anything like that. And so the reason I became a parent coach was I was really lonely. We were stigmatized. My wife and I were not on the same page at all. I was authoritarian parent. My wife was a permissive parent, and we needed to kind of grieve and forgive each other and learn how to communicate and align better together and learn how to communicate with our child better. It really changed us for the good. And so it gave me the opportunity to say that there are a lot of other parents who could use this kind of help. And I've been fortunate to be doing that ever since.
How's your daughter doing now?
She's okay. When people ask me what would have happened if you didn't send her away or give her the gift of wilderness, it's hard to speculate, but there's a good chance she might not be here. I mean, she was literally going down that hole. So we feel like the fact that she's here and the fact that she's managing is a blessing. The fact is she's actually doing okay. She lives with her boyfriend. She works, but she has her ups and downs because she still has anxiety over certain things, and she's found other ways to cope and bridge the short-term memory issues as she's matured. But it's like if you have an alcohol problem, you're always an alcoholic. She'll always have some anxiety and depression issues that she has to deal with, and the way that she faces things. She's a productive member of society and is doing okay.
Being a parent coach now who's helped families in crisis and helping families intervene on the paradigm that's going on, had you been hired to step into your own family, had you right now being hired to step in to assist with what you, your wife, and your daughter was going through at the worst of it, what would have been the biggest first piece of advice that you'd have smacked yourself upside the head with? What would have been the big first coaching that you would have been like, okay, there, Andy, no more of that?
It's really simple. I was not attuned. I got brought up when I was brought up. I had two parents who divorced when I was 12. I kind of got put in a position where I had to kind of figure things out on my own, and I did. So I figured my daughter should be able to figure some things out on her own. So I was kind of the get her done kind of parent. And so what I learned, and I try and instill in the parents that I coach, is you really have to create an environment where your kid feels comfortable talking to you. And that means being curious, not being judgmental, being there as an ear, being there to support them in any way you can support them, as opposed to telling people that they're good or bad, being judgmental, lecturing them, comparing them, which a lot of parents do based upon the way they were raised or the way they see parenting based upon their point of view. And so, I've had discussions with my daughter about this, and she basically just says, for us, if you had taken some time to kind of understand where my head was a little bit better, we would have been able to at least connect a little bit better. It doesn't mean I wouldn't have gone away. It doesn't mean my problems would have been solved, but at least we would have been a little bit more on the same page, and it would have been so hard at the end.
You talked about a strategy that I would imagine 95% of parents try when their kids start spinning out, and that's the lockdown safe space. I mean, that is, it feels like it's standard protocol in the book of fear parenting. You take away the phone, then you take away the computer, then you take away this. And you and I had talked off the air. It's even with kids who self-harm. Next thing you know, you're locking all the knives up. The kitchen knives. You can't even cut a piece of meat while you're cooking without getting a knife out of a safe. But parents try to lock down the environment. Now, you said very clearly it made it worse. Why is that?
I think it was worse because our child just felt like, when somebody wants attention, it's nice when it's positive attention, but sometimes it's not positive attention. They're just craving attention. And so she was just trying to find ways to feel better about herself in the short term, one way, shape, or form. And it was either getting together with friends who were being a little bit devious and unsafe after hours, like 3 o'clock in the morning, going out and drinking and then driving when, other unsafe people were out at that time of night on a school night, or smoking or going to places that were unsafe. She was going into like abandoned houses for some reason, just trying to hang out there because it was devious and because it was mysterious and because it was, maybe a little bit troubling, and a place where she would feel, even though it wasn't safe, it was a place that maybe she felt safe because it wasn't amongst her peers. It wasn't amongst others. And so it didn't work because we didn't have a solution to allow herself to feel better about her situation and herself. We either had to help her find the path, or she had to find the path herself. And that didn't exist until she went to wilderness, which allowed her to kind of remove all these stressors and things that set her off. And when she went to wilderness, it was like a whole cloud had been lifted off of her. It was a big transformation when it came to that, and those were the hardest days. We didn't know any better. All you can do as parents is try your best, and you want to protect your kid, and you want your kid to be safe. That's all my wife and I were trying to do at the time.
And I know parents, my listeners, are dealing with this, that it sounds like no matter what consequences you came up with, nothing worked. In your mind, Andy, is that a problem with your consequences, or is that a problem with how you work consequences?
Probably both. At the time, because my wife was permissive, there were times that we would not align on consequences, and therefore the consequence was confusing or not clear, or we wouldn't be able to hold the consequence or the boundary because of being permissive. That created a situation where it became easy for her to kind of walk around that and take advantage of that. And when I work with parents, one of the key things we do is talk about what are the most important boundaries. You can't choose every boundary, but then how do you align or compromise proactively and have that discussion ahead of time so that the child actually knows, if I do this, this is what's going to happen. And they can make the choice. You're giving them power by allowing them to make the choice, even if it's your rules and your boundaries. A lot of parents don't do that. We didn't do that quite well. We've learned. And you also can't be hyper vigilant to correct everything that goes wrong in a reactive way or a proactive way. If your child is consistently being lectured or told he or she is wrong or that it's a problem, you got to really understand as a parent, whose problem really is it? Is it really a problem? Whose problem is it to solve? And sometimes parents want to solve all their problems for their kids, and they want to be the friends of the kids. And really, it's sometimes the kid just needs to be able to face the adversity or face the truth or be able to understand what they need to do to kind of address a specific issue. Could be something where a kid has a problem with a teacher. The parent immediately intercedes and it's the teacher's fault and protects the kid. And that's nice. The parent's trying to be a good parent, but it hasn't taught the child to actually talk to the teacher and maybe work it out for themselves with the parent support. And that's a life skill.
At brabapp.com, parents, I have posted a parenting masterclass. Before you fast forward through this commercial, give me a chance because I'm going to keep it short. The content is everything I have ever taught a parent in the past 20 years of working with parents in crisis. 56 classes in 3 components. The red, the beyond risk, the crisis children. Yellow, the at-risk children. And green, when things are going well, how do we get them to go great or keep them going well? It's everything I've ever taught a parent in 20 years of working with families. It's $99. I want every parent to be able to have access to this course. So please go to brabapp.com, B-R-A-B for Beyond Risk and Back. brabapp.com, brabapp.com. Check it out for yourself. Was deciding to send your daughter to treatment, was that like a slow burn workup to ultimately making a decision of that magnitude? Or was there a singular event where you said, it cannot get worse than this. If it does, I'm going to lose her? I find more often than not, it's dads who are holding out on that final treatment conversation. And my question to dads when I'm working with them is, what has to happen before you decide that this is the solution? And I remember a dad calling me while his daughter was in the hospital, and he was still against treatment. And I said, okay, well, she's OD'd and is in the hospital. What has to happen before you go, okay, now we're good. Now treatment makes sense. And that's when he was like, oh crap, I just keep moving the bar. Did you move the bar? Was there a situation where you were like, it can't get worse? Or was it a slow walk towards that ultimate goal?
No, everything kind of fell into place at one momentous time. It was December of 2017. My daughter basically had a panic attack and a meltdown over the final exams that she had. Literally, it got bad enough that we had to send her to a local behavioral hospital to kind of get her stabilized. And when she came back, it just was not the same. And her pediatrician knew of this wilderness and residential treatment ecosystem. We had no idea. And she basically said, I know some other parents who are dealing with tough issues with their children. And so they called us, and that's what opened our eyes to it. And within a couple of weeks, we had hired an educational consultant and made an assessment. And by early January, she was gone. And we had her transported. And we decided on Pacific Quest in Hawaii because we thought it was a great program. We really liked the counselor that she was assigned to. And we're also, even though I'm not originally from the South, we've been in the South for 25 years. And my daughter really was a warm weather person. She always preferred the warm weather. And so this was January. And rather than sending her to a program where she was out in the snow in Colorado or Utah, we figured it would be better for her to work on her mental health more than her physical health. And so it ended up, we sent her further away from Atlanta all the way to Hawaii. So it was a quick thing. And what a lot of parents that I've come across when they have an issue, it's they try and find a solution that works. They're expensive and timely, and then they make the decision. And then a week or two later, they're like, oh shit, how are we going to pay for this? The good news is that's probably the right sequence. You're caring about your children, but and trying to do the right thing first. But it's hard, and so this wasn't a long and drawn out process. And I know a lot of families. One of the things that differentiates me is being a guy. Men are a little less open and vulnerable. They don't want to necessarily pay for something that's a little more abstract that they don't know if it's going to guarantee straight line results. They have a different relationship with their kids, not being the mom. And I'm able to kind of connect, just being a guy and having been through some of what they're going through and understanding the psychology about what it takes to get them to buy in and to engage and to participate. And often it's the mom who calls me initially and says, we've got an issue. Can you help us? Sometimes the dad's right on board right away. And sometimes, I need to get on a phone with the dad and just say, hey, just give it a try. And if you don't see some quick results, it's okay. I'll still work with your wife or your partner or whatever. And almost every time they're able to see some quick results, because it doesn't take much to see some impact.
Let's address some of the things. I expressed my discontent offline to you about education consultants. You said, you're a parent coach, you're not an education consultant. I told you, as someone who ran a treatment facility, my wife and I tended not to work with them, and worked directly with the families. And as someone like you who coaches families in crisis, I will help and sometimes even enroll my wife in trying to help find a program. If you had to do this over again, would you bring in an education consultant this time? And knowing what you know, I think that's fair. And yes or no, why? Why wouldn't you, or why would you bring in an education consultant?
I would now in my position, only because if I had to do it again right now, I know a lot more about the ecosystem and about the programs and about how to navigate. I didn't know anything. I think the important part, like anything else, is, I know our discussion was about where some of the incentives and alignment is with these educational consultants. And many of them are very well versed and are very good. And we happened to find one and worked with one that we were very happy with. And so she pointed us in the right direction and stayed with us. And it was an investment, but it was worthwhile because it gave us peace of mind. Because if you send your kid to the wrong place and they have the wrong counselor, that it could really set you back. And so, that being said, I've had situations where parents who are looking to give that gift and send their kids away, they work with somebody who just has an expertise in wilderness and doesn't have an expertise in other areas that might be right for the kid. And they push the one area that they're most comfortable with because that's what they believe in and that's what they know. But that's not necessarily the right answer. That's where I would draw a line in the sand. It's just making sure that all the possible solutions are explored, including local ones. You don't want to send your kid away unless you really have to. It's really a last resort. It's not the first thing you choose to do.
Yeah, and I think there's a couple conversations that come up because you've brought up a few things. Number one, you brought up the investment of an education consultant, in addition to the investment you're going to make in wilderness, which is still not covered by insurance, which is criminal in and of itself, but also very costly. And then on top of that is a residential program, which may or may not be covered by insurance and can be very costly. And you're also talking about a paradigm where educational consultants, they do see a path to success coming through programs that they prefer, and it generally is wilderness first, residential second. Wilderness can go anywhere from 45 to 95 days, sometimes even longer, and that's cash out, and they're not cheap programs. And then residential, while 28 days is a model, it is no longer the popular model. 3 months minimum is a pretty standard, and 6 months is the new popular treatment model. This is a lot of money. Are you willing to say how much you spent in this venture? I know your daughter's worth it, and you've made that very clear by you start with, I'm gonna save her life, and somewhere in the next 5 steps you're like, wait, how much? Okay, I'm gonna make this work, and you did. How much did you spend?
She was away for 13 months in total. Plus, we had the educational consultant. Plus, we had all the transportation. Plus, we had testing. Plus, we went out and visited. So it probably set us back about 150 grand. Ultimately, the only offset we got to that was a feeling that we were doing our best to support our child and ourselves. And then, we were able to write off some of the medical expenses on our taxes because we weren't able to recover it through insurance. Now, the insurance protocols have changed a little bit, and it's a little bit more, some things are covered a little bit more. And now you may be aware, but the wilderness industry itself, to get covered, has been moving towards a 30-day covered program where you get insured, but you're only there for 30 days. And what the wilderness programs are doing is they're trying to survive and adapt. But what's happening is 30 days typically isn't enough. So
It's never enough.
yeah, it's not enough.
The 30-day model is one of the largest jokes in the treatment industry, simply because the 28 days was the amount of time that the Navy would allow their officers to not be on active duty before they dishonorably discharged them for their alcoholism. They were willing to let the soldiers get treated for 28 days before they cut it off. And the United States government just adopted that model as the standard for treatment. And there is no evidence to support this, especially with adolescents. Especially, it's one of the most frustrating things. Andy, you had talked about earlier, and I want to start to jump back in about the conversations around unity with your wife, the authority versus the permissive. But before I do that, one of the things that strikes me about talking to you is that this started to become, as dads, as hopefully intelligent men, as men who love our daughters, these things that we decide is going to be their life that slowly gets chipped away at by depression or anxiety or social media or whatever. And then next thing you know, they're drinking and they're using and they're sneaking out and they're putting themselves in desperate situations. There's a consistent sacrifice you're having to make about what you're going to allow, about what you're going to do about things. And at the end, what was it that made you say, we'll take the ultimate sacrifice because it's her life? Like, what was it? Was it just that it was your daughter, or were you sick of staying up at night and wondering, and what were you willing to sacrifice?
I feel blessed in my life in that I've been fortunate that some doors have closed, but other doors continue to open. And part of that might be my faith. Part of that might be luck. Part of it might be that I try and be a good person. We were at wit's end. We didn't know where else to turn. So we were in survival mode until we found out about wilderness and residential treatment. And so we were willing to do what we needed to do. We would have gotten on a spaceship to Mars if it was going to, help her get better and help her, be in a situation where she was safer. With the door open when we found out about the opportunities for treatment that required to send her away. And it was a hard decision because my wife and I were grieving, because we were sad that my daughter was having to go through this. We were sad that we were put in this position, and we felt like, what did we do wrong? There was a little blame and shame with each other because of the way we parented differently and saw things differently and didn't align well. And so we went through a lot at that time. But do I regret what we did, or would I have done anything differently in terms of the choices that we made? No.
A lot of news, very provocative news. There's been a few stars, A-listers, B-listers who've come out not in favor of wilderness programming because of abuse that they felt they suffered. I'm not saying they didn't. I'm just saying the wilderness industry has a lot of heat on it. There's a program out of Utah right now that caught a lot of flack very recently for literally being a child labor camp, according to the court documents. They've changed their status, and now there is no way for the state to hold them to child care residential rules anymore. And they're now catching flack for just changing their status, not the way they work with kids. Now, I've never been to that program, nor have I ever met a child who's been through that program. But what do you say to parents who, when you say, hey, I think it's time for wilderness and or a residential program, and they toss the pile of news stories and newspaper clippings about horrifying experiences with residential and wilderness program for kids? How do you respond to that?
So I'm very biased, partly because of the success and the belief in the program that my daughter went through, but also just looking at the statistics and getting to know some of the programs and some of the parents who have sent their kids through programs. If you go to, the industry trade organizations called NATSAP, I'm sure you're familiar with that. They have all these statistics, and the naysayers who have come out, led by this one celebrity who's been most vocal. My view on this is that the industry has evolved. It wasn't consistently regulated. It came from Outward Bound and Boy Scouts, and so it was meant to be tough on kids. These kids are in bad situations, behavioral problems. My daughter was, unmanageable. So when they get pulled out from their surroundings and they get a little bit of discipline and consistency, some of them don't like it, but oftentimes it's good medicine. And there were some instances that are well documented where the kids were, not treated well, and that's not acceptable. The industry has come a long way in the last 20 years. The regulations and the oversight have increased, the standards have increased. And the way I look at it is, it's 95+% good. The stats prove it out in terms of, kids being in a better position having gone to wilderness or residential treatment. And if you ask the right questions to make sure you're in the right program, use an educational consultant, understand their methodologies and history, who's leading it, who's going to be your counselor, like anything else, just, do your diligence. You should be okay. And like anything else in life, you can hone in and decide that the 5% that isn't so good is going to ruin your whole experience, or you can look at it as being glasses more than half full and could be the right solution for you and your family. And if you're not diligent about asking the right questions and you just decide, I'm going to put my kid anywhere because I can't take the kid at home, then you're going to be in a situation that is worse off. And I'm such a believer in this kind of care for kids that I'm on the board of an organization called Sky's the Limit Fund, which collects fundraisers basically to provide grants for families who have financial need to be able to provide and send their kids to wilderness. So last year we provided $1.2 million in grants to over 100 families.
My question now is, what does your daughter say about it? What does she say about wilderness and residential after the fact?
She's got mixed feelings about it, to be transparent. When we talked to her after she initially came back in 2019, she was well, let me even back up. When my wife went to meet her to spend a long weekend with her between wilderness and residential treatment, they spent a weekend together, and then my wife helped to get her into the next program that we had selected. My daughter said something that was kind of profound to my wife. She said, "I'm so lucky. I got to learn all these coping skills and mechanisms at such a young age that some people who don't have some of these challenges will never learn." That was pretty profound and kind of important. And she also reflected at the time on her experience being a good one. She struggled more in residential treatment. It's where instead of it being a reset button, they make you get a job, they push some adversity on you, you're in more challenging therapy, you're living amongst a group that you have to navigate with and work with. And she struggled at times a little bit more with that when she was pushed. And so she's influenced by social media and everything else, and she's seen some of the negative publicity, and she sometimes reflects on what a positive experience it is. She also sometimes sees some kids who have raised their hands and said, my experience wasn't so good, and so she sides with them as well, knowing who they are. She's entitled to her opinion. Again, I think it was a great benefit to her and us, and a great benefit to a lot of other families.
What was the most powerful part of you and your wife's recovery through all this?
I think forgiveness. I traveled a lot on business. She was the at-home coach. She was the at-home parent. And again, she was more permissive. So I would come home and things would be in disarray, and the kids would be whining and complaining, and she'd be allowing it, and it would bother me, and I would argue with her about it, or I wasn't the one that was present. I wasn't the one who was understanding the other things that were going on that she was trying to deal with. And so I needed to kind of relinquish that and forgive myself and her for what she was doing. And at the same time, the other way around, she needed to realize where I was trying to come from, given how I was brought up and what I was seeing. The other thing is there's so many parents that I work with who, when they become of parenting, they decide to become parents. Everything's about their kids and everything's about work. Nothing's about them being a couple. So, I ask parents, what do you do together, like when you first met, that allows you to be connected and communicate? Well, we go out for dinner. Well, that's great. How often do you do that? Oh, we go out once every month, maybe. It's not in our calendars. We just kind of do it. You do it just the two of you? Yeah, it's just the two of us. Well, what do you do when you go to dinner? Oh, we talk about our kids.
Yeah.
My wife and I, now that the kids are a little bit older, we are kind of in a phase in life where we used to say we don't want to spend that money, or we don't want to, or we've got other responsibilities, or let's just not do that. And we just say, hey, let's do it. We got invited, some friends of ours who on a whim said, you want to go to Vegas for the weekend and see Bruno Mars? And we live in Atlanta, and it was on a whim, in that it was something that came out of the blue. We had a month to prepare for it. We didn't go like on a moment's notice, but ordinarily it would have been like, it was a weekend where we could spend time together without the kids, do something that was fun, that would create memories for us. And even if though it was expensive, and even though it was whirlwind, it was still something we wanted to do that we wouldn't have done before. And you can't do that every week or every month, but something like that connected us.
All right, Andy, how are people going to get in touch with you? How can they follow up with you? Somebody's listening to you. They're like, I like the cut of this guy's jib. I want to follow up with them. How do they follow up with you?
Well, a couple things. I wanted to thank you for having me, and your back, everything you do in this ecosystem helps parents and helps kids. And I thank you for all you've done and continue to do. We talked earlier that I'm not the parent coach who helps parents with their kids because they don't eat their broccoli. It's usually serious stuff. They're really struggling in school. They're struggling with drugs. There's defiance. There are a lot of co-parenting issues with parents who are separated or divorced. It doesn't necessarily have to be just a situation where parents need help because their kids went away to a program. Most of my clients, frankly, aren't program parents. There are some, and I've certainly been there, but there are a lot more parents who have their kids at home and are trying to overcome something significant. And I'm willing, I got into this business to help people, so I'm willing to have a discussion with anybody, even just to be an ear or to lend a resource, whether or not I can help them as a parent coach. And when I parent coach, I generally work with people for 3 or 4 months. I have a program. We meet weekly, and basically my job is to work myself out of a job so that they regain confidence and joy in their life and their parenting. And I enjoy doing it, and I've been successful at it, and want to continue to help more parents. And the best way they can reach me is at parentsjourneycoaching.net. That's my website, and you can read more about me, but there's also an opportunity to schedule that discovery call that I have. We didn't really touch on it, but social media and the 24/7 barrage of information that impacts our kids in a different way than when we grew up is a big factor in a lot of behavioral situations and arguments in families, and the way information comes, bullying, predatory behaviors. And so I actually have an assessment relating to social media in your household. And if you email me at andy@parentsjourneycoaching.net, I will send you a link to that assessment. You can fill it out. It's pretty simple, straightforward. It'll take you maybe 10 minutes, and I can give you a score and an assessment about what's working well and what you might want to think about to improve your situation there.
And then what's the foundation contact information?
It's skiesthelimitfund.org.
Folks, make sure you follow up with Andy at parentjourneycoaching.net, skiesthefundlimit.org. If you are looking down that proverbial barrel of wilderness programming and its costs, they might be able to support you and get you some help. I'm on Andy's website right now. It's beautifully done. It's very straightforward, clean. There is that blue button right up top right of the page as soon as you get there to schedule an appointment. His phone number is right underneath it. So make sure you head over there to parentsjourneycoaching.net and connect with Andy. I think and have said that parents who have been through it make the best coaches, because they know that there's more than just the financial or just the spiritual or the physical or the mental or the emotional. It's all of it. That's the sense I get when I listen to Andy talk, is that he's seen this from every single side. This is why support, this is why collecting resources, this is why you immersing yourself not into your child's results on a daily basis or into their behavior or, what happened today, versus can you spend part of that day actually doing your own research about wilderness and good wilderness programs, because there's some amazing wilderness programs out there. Pure Life in Costa Rica, Open Sky out of Durango, Colorado, Pacific out of Hawaii. Those are three very popular programs, but there are hundreds of them there, and you can look, but it's a dig. It's an immersion. Residential programs, I wish there were more of them, but there are a lot of them that you still got to work your way through. And part of what I really appreciate Andy doing with us is helping you get past some of the sticker shock. This recovery program for your adolescence, it's expensive, mentally, physically, emotionally, spiritually, and financially. And it is why you've got to focus on prevention as much as you can, even now with your kid already struggling. What can you do to prevent? I want you to, if you have to, listen to this show again and listen to how he talked about tuning in to what his daughter was going through, about how he was connecting or disconnecting with his wife, around who is authoritative and who is permissive and who should be right versus, here's the thing. When your kid is struggling this deep and you and your partner can't get along and you and your kid can't get along and you know that you're right, I gotta ask you this question. Would you rather be right or would you rather be happy? Those two things don't always go together. And when we're dealing with a teen in recovery, when their life, when their body health is on the line, being right versus being alive, what you're willing to sacrifice to keep this kid alive and going, it may not be about you being right. Not anymore. Parents, as always, I say this at the end of every episode, and I always will, take care of yourselves first, your adult relationships second, and your children third. That's how you do your best work with your children. And huge thanks to Deepen Productions for making this show sound so good and keeping us up in the numbers. Parents, teachers, clinicians, thank you for joining us for another episode of Beyond Risk and Back. and we'll talk to you next week.